Well, good morning. This morning I'm coming to you from our church. I'm coming to you from our kindergarten and our pre-K class. And if you've ever taught a Bible class of that age group, you know they use a lot of visual aids and a lot of teaching aids. And unless they're organized, they can really get out of hand and be hard to find it when you need it. And that brings us to the project for this week. That's the reason for our project this week. Now, let me show you what the issue is and how we're going to go about it. Thanks for joining us. Here is the issue. We have these felt boards. There's about 12 to 15 of them. And they use them for reinforcing Bible scriptures and Bible stories. And they're just laying here. And the teachers have to go through them. So we're going to look for a way to organize these, to make them easily accessible, and to clear off this cabinet so this cabinet can be used for other things. Stay tuned. Glad you're with us.
Okay, we start by cutting the left and the right side of the carcass to a width of 20 inches. It'll be 48 inches tall, which is the length of this plywood, but we're trimming the left and the right side to 20 inches wide. And now I'm laying out a dado and rabbets on the left and the right side of the carcass. The rabbets will accommodate the top and the bottom, and the dado will accommodate a shelf that's near the bottom. And here I've got to clamp it across both pieces, and I'm cutting a dado that will house that little bitty shelf that's near the bottom. By doing it this way, everything is all lined up and stays straight. And now we're cutting the shells for the top and the bottom, and you can see there they're 25 1/4 inches long, and there's 3 of those, top, a bottom, and then that shelf that will fit into the dado. And here I'm going to cut a rabbet along the back edge of the left and the right side, and this will accommodate the back of the carcass. And I'll also cut this in the top and the bottom edges of both of the shells. Now we're cutting a 3/4 inch runners. There's 38 of them. This is what the drawers will slide on. There's 19 drawers, 1 runner on each side, 3/4 by 3/4 by 18 inches long. Now we'll begin the assembly of those. You notice I've got a piece of pine in the dado that we cut, and that's our starting point. The square along the right hand side is set where the edge is 3/4 inch from the edge of the front of the carcass, and that lines everything up so that when the drawers are installed, they'll be inset. You can see I've got a 1.5 inch wide spacer that I'm using to keep everything lined up and square. That lets all of the drawer runners be spaced equal from top to bottom, left to right. And here we are, we're winding it up. You can see I'm still using my 1.5 inch spacer, but now I'm using a combination square set at 3/4 inch to space these runners exactly 3/4 inch from the front edge of the carcass. This is number 38 right here. And in this shot you can see the left and the right side and all of the drawer runners installed. Now we'll assemble the carcass. I put glue in the dado and I put the shelf in. You noticed I've drilled some pocket hole screws. We're going to be using 1 inch coarse thread pocket hole screws. I'm using the Rockler clamp it squares there to hold the unit square. And now we just drive in the pocket hole screws, which holds it nice and firm while the glue dries. And now we put glue in the rabbet, which is the bottom. Same process, using the clamp it, the Rockler clamp it square to hold it nice and square and tight. And then again, we'll drive in 1-inch coarse thread pocket hole screws. We'll repeat this process at the top. This is the top of the unit. Glue in the rabbet, the square to hold it square, and then the pocket hole screws. And now we're putting the other side on. The process is the same. Put glue in the dados, glue in the rabbets, and we just flip it over, and a little gentle influence or a little gentle persuasion, because that dado was a pretty tight fit. But we'll a little influence there, and it settles in nicely. We use a couple of clamps to hold it nice and steady while we repeat the process of running in the pocket hole screws. Now we're at the other end, which is the top of the unit, and just duplicating the process. Any kind of furniture, there's a lot of redundancy, as you've seen here. Well, here you see what I got caught with. This little space was pretty narrow. I couldn't get a drill in, so I've got a snake that I put on my drill with my bit in it, and it comes in handy when you need it. For mobility purpose, we're installing 1.5-inch swivel casters on the bottom of it. I didn't need the locking ones because this is not going to get moved around. But we're installing 1.5-inch swivel casters for mobility. Now we're going to iron on edge banding on the edge of the plywood. And this is maple iron-on edge banding. I think I got it at the local big box store. And you just want to make sure that you get a good heat and that you get it nice and firmly attached to your unit, to the edge of the plywood. And then I'll come back with a piece of wood and really put the pressure on it to make sure that it is really down nice and firm. And then with a good sharp utility knife, I'll square up all the edges and then trim. They do have edge banding trimmers that you can buy, and I have one somewhere, but this utility knife was handy and it works as well. Just careful cutting of the banding along the edge of the plywood. And just a few touch-ups. I'll take a piece of sandpaper and just sand off the edge, remove any excess glue. Now we're going to cut the drawer bottoms. There's 19 of them, and we're cutting them to 19 inches wide here. And then in just a second we'll adjust the fence to 25 inches wide. It's actually 25 1/4, I think. So we trim each one. So the final dimension is 19 by 25 1/4. Now to accommodate all of our sliding drawers or partial drawers, I've got to cut a rabbet so that the bottom will set in. I'm going to cut it about 3/8 of an inch into about half the dimension of the drawer front, and it'll only be about 3/16 deep, so the piece of plywood will sit right in there. We've got the table saw set up to make our first cut. bottoms will sit right in there. Now we're just going to glue the drawer bottoms that we cut into the drawer fronts, into the rabbet we just cut on each one. Just a little bit of glue in the rabbet, and then about 6 or 8 1-inch brad nails. Set them aside and let them dry nice and square, and they'll be real strong. And we just repeat that process 19 times. A little glue, get the bottom sitting in the rabbet, and then just brad nail it. Now we're making the handles. I've got about a 1/2 inch cove bit set up in my router table, and you can see here I've got a piece of pine. I'll cut that cove on one edge, and then I'm going to flip it over and I'll cut it on the opposite edge of that. And once that's cut, then I'll split that down the middle. I'll cut those coves off, and they'll act as our handle. Here we're just trimming them to 2 inches in length. Need 19 of them, 2 inches in length. To put the handles on, I made a little jig. It's 25 1/4 across here, so I made a little jig that from the quarter that makes it sit equidistant from here to here. So all I have to do is center it, and then I can locate them and glue them and nail them in. Simple but effective. For the top, I had resawn some of the barn wood to a 1/4 inch, and I'm just laying it down over the top in a staggered pattern so that the top now matches the drawer fronts. This barn wood was 3/4 inch thick, and I got it from, again, the big box store. Simply pine that they somehow or another decorated or processed to look like barn wood. But it's really a nice little change, and like I said, it's been resawn to 1/4 inch thick, and I'm just laying it up there much like you would a laminate floor.
Before we show you the finished product, we appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for staying with us. Hope you enjoyed the build. Hope you got something out of it. And until the next time, be creative, be thoughtful, and be safe. Now, let's look at the finished product. Well, good morning. A week has gone by, and here's what we've been working on this week. Remember at the beginning I showed you the problem where we had these felt backgrounds that we use in our Bible class for teaching aids. They were stored all over the counter. Well, this was our solution. It's a little cabinet that's 26 inches wide and 20 inches deep, and we've got about 19 partial drawers. It's really just a piece of plywood, as you saw in the build, with a false front. You saw us build the drawers with the little runners, and we made the drawers, and you can see they just sit in here, and the teachers can just pick out the entire felt pad or seam or whatever and use it in the classroom and put it back, and they're there for all the different types that we talked about. This was a great little project, and it's going to be very useful for our teachers, for our church, and for our kids.